If a suburban middle-class white Christian soccer mum who thought all video games glorified violence attempted to make a game for children, this is probably pretty close to what the end result would look like, except it features Santa instead of Jesus. My name is Graeldon, I'm on an impossible journey to review every Steam game in alphabetical order, and today we're playing 1001 Hugs, even if I wish I weren't. Let's begin. No matter what I say about this game, no matter how carefully I phrase things, someone will take something completely out of context and it's going to sound very, very bad. At its core, 1001 Hugs is a game about chasing down children, enticing them with gifts of teddy bears, and then hugging them before running away so that you don't get caught. No, you don't play as Pedo Bear, but you do play as a small child, which makes things marginally better, despite the fact it is being controlled by someone who is most definitely an adult. All of that is to say, this game made me feel weird. Released on the 1st of October 2019 and both developed and published by Igel or Bonova, 1001 Hugs is a free-to-play game that appears to have been created as a non-violent alternative to popular 3D shooters like Fortnite and specifically aimed at children. Considering it was never released on mobile devices though, I feel like they may have missed their target audience and severely overestimated the average age of people that use Steam. We actually passed by this game when making the previous video, as thanks to the devs deciding to name one game 1001 Black Raven Jigsaw instead of 1001 Jigsaw Black Raven, we ended up a bit out of order. But we're here now, so let's find out what we're in for. Upon starting the game, a couple of things happen in quick succession, the first of which was so fast that I actually missed it by starting the recording too late, so I immediately relaunched the game and yes, the intro cinematic does indeed play for a couple of seconds and then automatically skip itself. Good to know the game thinks it's so bad it's not worth playing. At the same time, we also get notified that Steam VR has attempted to launch and no headset was detected. Now, these two things may be linked, but I wasn't able to test it, so for now, we're moving right along. From the title screen, we can access stats and achievements, character customization, and the settings. In the settings, we have mouse sensitivity, resolution options, of which 1080p is the highest, and it's all downhill from here. There's also a full screen toggle, and admittedly, I thought that was it for quite a while because I missed the scroll bar on the side. I did find it later, and yes, there's extra graphical options like AA, shadows, textures, and effects, but surprisingly, there aren't any audio options, which is a problem because the default levels are way too loud. The stats and achievements section is split into 3 sections for overall scores, hugs given, and bears caught, which will make sense shortly, but all you need to know for now is that the top player, Lord Executioner, has amassed almost 1.4 billion points and is miles ahead of anyone else. For context, by the end of my roughly 1 hour playthrough, I had a grand total of around 11,000 points, meaning Lord Executioner has either put over 2,000 hours into this game, or they're a dirty, dirty cheat. I'll let you decide which is more likely after you see some gameplay. Lastly, we have the character customization section, where you can view your childish monstrosity that you'll be playing as in all its glory. Looking at this page, I can think of 2 things you might be wondering about. The first is why the character is wearing a Santa hat, and the answer for that is simple. The game underwent a pretty big Christmas-themed overhaul, so now it's permanently Christmas. The opening cinematic probably explains some of it, but we'll never know. The second thing you might be wondering is whether or not this game has microtransactions in the form of cosmetics, and of course the answer is yes! The better question is, why? And this has an even simpler answer. Money! Because what better audience to target with microtransactions than young, impressionable children? When talking about fleecing your audience, the younger you can start, the better. Sarcasm aside, I honestly don't know why anyone would pay money for any of these cosmetics, especially when they cost up to a bit over $3 dues and look downright hideous. These models look like they've come straight from Toy Story 1 early test footage and wouldn't look out of place as props for children's toys in a horror movie. So, with our horrifying avatar selected, we can finally start playing, and clicking on Game Rules takes you straight into the tutorial. Again, the opening cinematic is cued to play on the wall on the left and immediately fails. Along the wall are a series of infographics detailing gameplay mechanics, including one for basic movement, which is slightly too far away to read clearly, or at least not without, you guessed it, moving. So you need to move in order to learn how to move. Perfectly pointless. The tutorial messages also reference clicking keys on the keyboard, adding support to the argument that this game was at the very least made by someone quite unfamiliar with actual games or game terminology. In addition to movement, you can perform a role, an ability I never used outside of this tutorial, but I will admit I appreciated they actually included an obstacle to test it out on. It's a shame they didn't work anything like this into the level design, but honestly, I'm assuming that the rudimentary AI couldn't handle it, so they just didn't build it into any of the maps. The sprinting is also visually awful, and I honestly don't know how it made the final cut, as it made me a bit motion sick after playing for a while, and there wasn't any way to turn it down or off in the settings. Now, rather than explain all the basic mechanics, I'm going to instead mention here that there is music in this area, and it stops playing after a couple of minutes because they forgot to loop it, leaving you with the background ambience of kids playing and screaming. Perfect. In order to pass a level, you'll need to hug 4 kids who are wearing helmets that match the colours at the top of the screen. I think they're technically elves, not kids though, or elf children. To save us all from confusion, I'm just going to call them kids. Otherwise, if you're just listening in because I'm on your second monitor, you might mistakenly think that I'm giving Legolas and all his family big hugs. I did notice that the models for the kids all have green hands, and I can only assume this is a visual bug because the player model does not. To hug someone, simply run up to them and touch them. Simple enough, except that sometimes the collision detection fails unless you're on a specific angle. Or it fails if there's too much of a height difference due to standing on ramps. And it can be problematic if someone is standing in a doorway that you really need to pass through and refuses to move. You're given a supply of 1001 candy canes, and you'll use one every time you hug someone, as though you're needing to bribe them with candy in order to get them to comply with you, which feels wrong on multiple levels. The only way it could be worse is if you rocked up to each level in a white van with free candy spray painted on the side. Some kids play rough though and are armed with toy guns that fire water balloons that bounce around before leaving a puddle on the ground. Step in the puddle and you'll lose a handful of candy canes. Candy canes can't be replenished, and if you run out before finishing the 16th level and reaching Santa, it's game over. You do have far more than you should ever need unless you're an actual 5-year-old playing this game, but it still feels weird that they'd put such a definite fail state into a kid-friendly game. It feels especially bad when you're hugging a kid and the puddles form underneath you, so as soon as the animation ends, the slip happens because you've been animation locked the entire time. The solution, of course, is to shoot them, with your teddy bear launching toy gun, at which point they'll drop their toy gun in order to catch the bear. This is a good way to incorporate an actual shooting mechanic into the game, or it would be if it were any fun. Bears only travel a limited distance before they simply vanish. They are affected by gravity, so shooting upwards barely works, and half of the time the bears just bounce off the kids, unless you happen to get the perfect angle on the first try. You can also hold the right mouse button down to aim, which causes your character's head to block anywhere between a third to half of the screen, depending on the direction you're moving in. It's a pain, but you'll just have to suck it up and deal with it, because otherwise you won't be getting the hugs from the kids you need in order to progress. There are also 3 presents hidden in each level for you to find and return to Santa. These aren't a prerequisite for beating the game, but they are tied to achievements. They also aren't tracked on the level select screen, so hopefully you've got a good memory for what you have and haven't found. Otherwise, you might be spending a while running around a level that you've already found them all in, if you choose to do so because you actively hate yourself. Not that you could be doing it for too long anyway, because each level has a strict time limit of 2 minutes. The final thing in this tutorial space is a series of artwork that was submitted by players, or their children, and added into the game. All of this art is honestly great. And this is a wonderful feature to include that brings some much needed life and personality to the game. It's a shame there is so little, and that all of the art is more impressive than what the devs could create themselves. I feel no shame in saying this, because once I got into the actual levels, it was pretty clear that they were filled with a handful of original assets, mixed in with a bunch of low-poly objects that were clearly sourced from an asset pack or two. The levels themselves are fine in terms of their design and layout, nothing particularly groundbreaking to see here. The first few levels are a series of children's rooms, likely seen through the eyes of their wonder and imagination. It then devolves pretty quickly into whatever themes seem to take the devs' fancy, including an elf town, a disco room, a few campsites, and some abstract Tetris rooms, clearly designed by someone who's never played Tetris before in their life. Some levels require more platforming than others, particularly the final level that is set in the clouds. Said platforming is clunky, with jumps locking you into the direction and velocity you have at the time of starting the jump. No mid-air corrections allowed here. So a simple mistake can see you tumbling right back down to the bottom. Many of these levels have been filled with various toys and other objects, all of which have their own physics and will get bumped and knocked around by whatever pathetic excuse of AI was bestowed upon these poor NPCs, and the resulting collision interactions with the player will send you rocketing off into the far corners of the stage. Jumping on large balls to go flying was the most entertaining part of the game, and is likely completely unintentional. Some of the levels are also filled with so many objects that my poor beast of a PC was struggling to maintain a solid 60 FPS, so either the game was never tested on the maximum graphical levels, or the devs have a supercomputer from the future that can actually play Crysis, for the first time in human history. Or more likely, it's just incredibly poorly optimized. Gameplay can be summarized as simply scanning the kids to find the matching helmet patterns and then gifting them a bear if necessary before proceeding to gently tackle them with a warm embrace. This would be simple enough were it not for the doors randomly scattered about the levels that the kids can use, effectively teleporting them from one location to another at random. Many times I finally spotted the kid I needed, only to have them duck through a doorway to another part of the map moments before I arrived. "Stupid kid, get back here! I have candy for you! Stop running away from me!" After finishing the 16th level, you're treated to a short cutscene with Santa where the presents you've found drop into a pile. Honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if it were Jesus instead of Santa, given the whole Christian mums against video games vibes going on here, and yes, I know that's a meme page and not real, but still. This ending is possibly just as awkward. After the cutscene finishes, nothing really happens. You can continue to play through levels, but your stack of candy canes will continue to deplete. I assume that once that happens, you'll need to restart the game, but I won't be putting the extra time into it to test that theory. Lord Executioner, hugger of children, might know though. Perhaps my perspective is biased because I've never been in a position where I was actively looking for games aimed at children to review, but I feel like a lot of games released in this space are almost purposefully bad, as though they have adopted the mindset that because it's for kids, it doesn't need to be as innovative or polished. It's just accepted that games for kids are not simply more basic, but are also of lesser quality than games for adults. Now, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but personally, I think this reasoning is flawed and is a big part of why games like Fortnite get flooded with children, while the games marketed towards kids see very little success. Like adults, kids also just want a fun game to play. It's as simple as that. And 1001 Hugs certainly doesn't meet the criteria. It's a game that's been developed with a very clear objective in mind, and to the developers' credit, I think they achieved that. However, there is a massive divide between their objective and what kids actually want to play. The Venn diagram of what the devs made and what kids want to play would just be a picture of two circles that never touch. So by that measure, the game is a complete failure. Even expanding outside of what I'm assuming the target audience to be, there is very little on offer here that would capture the attention of anyone with more than a passing familiarity with video games. In all honesty, I do think there is possibly an untapped market for non-violent games in the third-person shooter genre that a lot of parents would prefer their children to play rather than the latest Call of Duty. Oh wait, that's just Splatoon. Overall, I think 1001 Hugs is a great example of why having a diverse audience playtest your game is so very, very important. But equally as important is actually listening to the feedback you receive. In this case, I think the devs didn't do much of either column A or column B, resulting in the confused mess we've borne witness to. The biggest insult in this game though has to be the microtransactions. Yes, the game is free, so they have to monetize it somehow, but why not just have a supporter pack that unlocks extra levels? Treat the base game like a demo, but no. They tied it to cosmetics, which feels so out of place in a single-player game. Unless I'm actually out of touch. Is this actually acceptable these days? I mean, we have so many AAA games with pre-order bonuses that are usually just cosmetic outfits, so maybe we're actually already doing this, and like the proverbial frog in the hot water, I hadn't realized what was happening up until this point. Either way, this monetization method leaves not only a bad taste in my mouth, but also a hint of confusion, as it suggests that they were possibly planning on this being a multiplayer game. The bones are all there, but as anyone who has worked in game development, even just as a hobby, would be able to tell you, adding multiplayer to a game is not as simple as flicking a switch. So it very well could have been their ambition, and then they had to dial back the scope when they realized what it would involve. At the end of the day, we're left with a bare-bones third-person shooter that comes across as more creepy than kid-friendly, which is why my final rating for 1001 Hugs is children laughing out of 10. It seems cute at first, until you realize it's 3 AM, you're all alone, and you don't have any kids. Welcome to the end of the video. As always, thank you to all the Crusaders and Templar Knights for supporting the channel, especially our noble knights Azazel, Daydos, Kartoffeljäger 3, Negi Malevolent, Chev_, and the Crabs. And an extra special thank you to our 4 Knights of the Holy Grail, Automatistic, Fuchs Card Expo, Freaky Feline, and Matey8. If you'd like to support the channel, check out the membership options below, or just remember to like and subscribe, that helps too. That's all for now, so if you've made it this far, here's a sneak peek of the next game. And until next time, take care.